went to the recruiter and I said, hey, I want to join Special Forces. And they said, well, you're the wrong gender.
Welcome to Stars of Service. I'm your host, Brian Christensen. Getting out of the military, it can be a really bumpy road. It's the water might not be clear of what you want to do, where you want to go, and the relationships that you have might be murky. You might need help to filter out everything like that, to see who and how you can communicate better, to have better relationships. And I thought I would bring a guest on today. Her name is Leah Schumacher or Schumacher.
Yeah, Schumacher.
Sorry,
That's
I
all right.
apologize right off the bat. You are an Army veteran, and I want you to tell us, how you basically your journey and what you do now.
Okay, so from the very beginning, I graduated from Wingate University. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I was waiting tables, making $5.50 an hour, plus tips. So,
That's hard.
yep. So, bachelor's degree and no trajectory in life, and woke up one morning, and it was President Bush was. It was a year post 9/11. President Bush was like, giving
W,
this.
yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
giving this, very, patriotic speech, and I was like, "Ooh, I should join the military." So I just took my little happy self over to the recruiter station.
Did you come from a military family or?
Yes, so
Okay.
my father was, a Green Beret in Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Thank him for service. Wow.
Yeah, he was an amazing person, and he served over there 64 to 65. Like I said, part of, the elite special forces. And that was, it was just on the precipice of being, what it is today. Right. So it
Right.
had just anyway, I digress. So I knew that my father could give me some advice. So I called him and he said, honestly, sweet girl, that's the best decision you could make. So went to the recruiter and I said, hey, I want to join special forces. And they said, well, you're the wrong gender, but
Yeah.
we can give you a great MOS that will support the special forces.
Oh, really? Okay. Go on.
So,
Tell me more.
so I said, okay, uh, what are those jobs? And then, of course, it is, all of the quartermaster jobs. So supply, water purification, cook.
Right.
All of, but we'll get you stationed with the special forces, though, the
Got it.
recruiter
Yeah.
says.
Just in case. Yeah.
So, and then like 6 months later, I was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, going through boot camp and went to Fort Lee, Virginia for my MOS training, and then as soon as I got done with that, hopped on a plane and went to Germany.
And this was the water purification job that you mentioned. The
Yes.
same one as Polly Shore in a
Yes.
certain Army movie that,
Yes.
yeah. How accurate is that, by the way?
Uh, the actual process of
Right.
purifying the water is accurate, but everything else is a farce.
How, so you were offered a few jobs and everything else in the Army, and
Mhm.
you went with water purification. Talk about what that truly meant, though, of what you were doing. Granted, it was a little far away from what you wanted to truly do. What was
Mhm.
it like to just truly support the force?
That's an interesting question. So those of us that have been deployed know that we don't always do our MOS when
Yeah.
we get deployed, right? So, um, while I recognized that my job was important, that was actually a very small facet of the bigger picture of what I was doing with my unit there.
Right.
Um, so what it meant, I mean, in terms of like a like an emotional perspective, or like what do you mean by?
Just basically, I mean, you're all part of the same team. It is one fight any way you
Yeah.
look at it. Um, you've got this elite group of war fighters surrounded by everyone who is supporting them in order to keep the mission going.
Yes.
I mean, so you've gotta feel some pride in what you're doing. You've gotta feel that, you know, "Okay, so the special forces guys would not be able to get out if I was there to help do my job and everything."
True, but the funny thing is that I was never stationed with the special forces. I was stationed with infantry
Right.
units, like sniper units
Yes.
and like, just various infantry units, but no, I mean, so yes, so my recruiter told me
Some murky things.
correct.
Feel like they've done that to all of us in one way or another, but it's our job to get past that and to
Yes.
come out, in clearer waters.
Clear waters, yes.
Sorry, these metaphors are terrible today. But I'm gonna jump now where you go, where you've served, and now you're getting out. And what's the process now? What are you doing?
So, backing up just a little bit, I had met my husband, the October after I got back from Iraq. So I got back from Iraq August of 2004, met Jason to October 2004. We get married the following July 2005. So it was a very quick whirlwind romance and marriage. Um, and I actually got deployed again to Pakistan right after we got married. So I was in Pakistan. That was actually very fascinating because that was during the earthquake that they had in 2005.
Oh, wow.
And so we were actually part of the largest, at the time, largest American contingent to enter Pakistan under those conditions. And we were humanitarian relief. We were with the MASH unit, the very last MASH unit
Oh.
that's ever existed, because then they changed everything over to caches.
Mhm.
And so that was actually very fascinating. And 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 yeah, that I could go on a tailspin with that, but
What, regarding that though, and now you're doing something so far removed from what your recruiter told you
Mhm.
you're going to do. What was that like real world, when it kinda hit the fan and you're right there and you're helping a country that just is recovering from an earthquake. I mean, that I can't even imagine what you saw every single.
It was interesting because we were not allowed to have our weapons.
Right.
Like, we were not allowed to have our weapons out. Even though we had them,
Right.
we weren't allowed to brandish them. So, we were actually surrounded by the Pakistani army, and, I mean, completely out of my element,
Yeah.
completely, and I could go into whole cultural, the cultural aspect and
Right.
all of that, but for that, I will say that I did feel a lot more, uh uh, not more helpful, but I did feel a lot more part of something greater
Right.
than just, surviving day to day in a combat zone. I
Right.
felt like we were actually, doing something positive for the people, and so that felt really good.
I can't imagine, especially, pictures and video that, came out after the fact. It's insane. With,
Mm,
with your career choice, your next career choice of going into, mental health, I
mhm.
wanna take a quick break, but we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about that change from supporting to supporting one-on-one,
Mhm.
where we're supporting an entire group of people, but now it's one-on-one, and I wanna hear how you made that change. Welcome back to Stars of Service. I'm Brian Christensen. Today we're joined with Leah Schumacher, and she was a Army. What was the actual full nomenclature title to this?
It was 77 Whiskey Water Treatment Specialist.
How do you join the Army and say, "Hey, I wanna be a water specialist"? I know we've got video of some
Yeah.
of the, a lot of soldiers, like, basically, this is the job that they do. Talk a little
Yes.
bit of what you're seeing, like, truly, what is the actual job? And Why is it so important?
Depending on, what kind of zone that you're in, it could be that you're, like you're purifying salinated water, you're purifying stuff that's like, coming out of a pond. Essentially, it is the immediate need to have water not only for drinking, which I would not suggest, but showering was a huge thing. And then with the defect being able to
The mess hall,
yes, correct, yes, and being able to
dining hall, sorry.
dining hall, there you go. All these acronyms, I don't remember everything anymore, um, but yeah, I mean, obviously super vital,
Right.
right? So water is one of the super vital ones, and we were sister MOSs with the Foxtrots, and they were the fuelers.
Okay.
Yes.
Gonna say, what's
Yes.
that?
Yes, and they were the fuelers. So essentially, and we were part of, you know, um, the 123rd Main Support Battalion. So support, I mean, obviously, that every MOS that we had in our unit was strictly to support
Right.
the fight. And so, yeah, like when I was in Iraq, I was stationed at a couple of different FOBs, but um,
Forward operating
forward, I'm
bases.
sorry, forward
It's okay,
operating
yeah.
bases, yes, and so, like, I remember we were literally in a GP medium tent on the side of the road, and we were purifying water out of a broken water main from a mortar that had essentially turned it into,
Oh,
like, a
wow.
small little pond,
Oh, wow.
and, yeah, so we just purified water that was already there, and essentially that means injecting a good bit of chlorine into it and making sure that
That
that the
sounds
bacteria
tasty.
that
Great.
the bacteria is less than, almost non-existent.
So you worked in that filtered type of environment, and you eventually got out,
Yes,
and you eventually got to what you're doing now. Talk
correct.
about that transition from, like I said, supporting others to
Mhm,
supporting individuals.
right,
And um, you used your GI Bill to do it. Talk
correct.
about that.
Yeah, so, getting back from Iraq, like I said, and meeting my husband during that time frame, a lot of my friends, my fellow soldiers were, going through a lot of difficult times. One of them, actually got put in Mannheim prison for attempted murder.
Oh my God.
Another couple of them got heavily into drugs and alcohol. A couple of them attempted suicide. And one of my friends that was in my unit, in my platoon, um, I actually had to be 24-hour suicide watch for her. And so, when I was seeing all of these things and noticing, and I I got out and I said, I want to do something to help figure out how,
Right.
what's going on, because PTSD was really not a topic. It
Yeah.
really wasn't, even in that time.
And people were told to basically, as you're getting out, you know, say everything, say you're fine. There's no reason to share anything that people don't need to know.
There's so much of a stigma that
Yeah.
exists in and out of the military, and so I had actually started working at the Red Cross in Cincinnati, and during that time, I found out about a 3-year program to get my master's degree.
Oh, wow.
And because I had already had my Wingate uh,
Agree.
degree
Yeah.
paid for, the GI Bill paid for me to get my master's degree. And pretty quickly, I mean, obviously, I wanted to get into working with veterans. Got hooked up with a couple of internships that helped me work with uh, veteran inmates at the Cincinnati jail, and they had a veterans treatment court there, and this was, like, on the cusp of, like, cutting edge back then. Well, now it's a lot more prevalent.
Right.
But instead of, if you have, whatever charges related to, um, uh, you know, drugs or, whatever, the veteran treatment court will treat those individuals by letting them get help versus being,
Serving or whatever the case.
correct. Yeah.
Wow.
So got in with that. And then, like I said, I got my master's degree from Northern Kentucky University. I had a couple of jobs, one working at the Salvation Army in Charlotte as the homeless veteran program
Right.
director there. That was a very difficult job. I could only do that for about a year, and then I went into private
Just
practice.
too many people needing help
I came
or
home crying every day. It was heartbreaking, especially to see children, in the homeless shelter
yeah.
and just the environment of that. It's just, as a social worker, you have to know where your lane is, right? So I knew my lane was not working with children, just too
Right.
heart-wrenching. And so because the veteran, program was within the Salvation Army, I had to
Right.
I was experiencing and seeing all of that, so.
With and now with working, well, you'll have a veteran come in and you
Mhm,
will talk to him or her
mhm,
and they can share their PTSD and their or things that are going on in their life or that
mhm.
happened. Um, what is the name of your title or your business? Excuse me.
So it is IGY6 counseling, which is I've got your back, I've got your 6, right?
Yes.
And, so I actually contract with the VA. There are a lot of veterans because of various reasons that either don't wanna go to the VA for therapy, it's too far of a drive. They don't trust the VA.
Yeah.
There's, a myriad of reasons, right? So the VA, I'm a community care provider. So the VA actually pays me to send the veterans to come and see me. So they come to my office. I would say probably 75% of my practice is
Oh
working
wow.
with these veterans, but and then I have just, the regular civilians as
Yeah.
well that make up the other percentage.
That's I want to take one more quick break,
Yeah.
but I want to uh, get on the couch and I want to ask you a couple
Mhm.
questions as far as what today's um, a feeling for veterans and
Mhm.
seeing what's going on
Yeah.
overseas right now and what they're feeling.
Mhm.
So let's take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Stars of Service. We're joined by Leah Schumacher, who is a licensed social worker,
Mhm.
who is also a veteran in the Army.
Mhm.
And we were just talking about the clients that come and see you now.
Mhm.
Um, majority veterans,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is PTSD, and
Mhm.
other types of trauma.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell me in most veterans that are who have already served, what's going on in their minds right now
Mhm.
with conflict in Iran?
Mhm.
What am I thinking, on any typical, day where I'm doing my normal job, but I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, there's this conflict on the other side of the world. I I feel like I need to be a part of it
Mhm.
because I was for, 20 something years."
Mhm.
What is that?
Mhm. At I mean, the way that it's been described to me is survivor's guilt, or leaving people behind, and not being able to participate in something that you've participated in before to serve your country, and it feels very wrong and very isolating,
Right.
right? I do have one client who currently he's only been out of the service for a couple of years, and he actually has friends that are still in, and so he immediately made phone calls, "Hey, is it?" checking to make sure
Right.
that
Yeah.
everybody's okay because we've already lost soldiers in this.
Yeah.
A lot of anxiety that is, not anxiety of like, oh, I'm gonna get called back in, but more like anxiety, like, you know, I've done this before, I've experienced this
Yeah.
before. This feels this is bringing up things that occurred whenever I was deployed or when I was in. And so, I mean, I have Vietnam veterans that are talking about, all of this being very triggering for them, and just kind of putting them again in that mindset of what it was like whenever they were deployed and they were going through this, and the state of the world was in chaos like it is now.
What are some things that we as veterans can do for ourselves to get past these triggering um, moments in our mind when things like this, these conflicts,
Hmm.
other things in the world? What can we do
Yeah.
to better ourselves, I guess,
Hmm.
or to enable ourselves?
Well, I mean, obviously, they need to come see me.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No, having open conversations and dialogue about it, not just suffering in silence and
Right.
and allowing these negative intrusive thoughts to just, simmer in
Yeah.
your mind.
And it's okay to talk to someone.
Absolutely.
I have talked to so many of my friends who have been dealing with like anxieties and other PTSD.
Mhm.
Uh, I was in Afghanistan in 2011. There were
Mhm.
9 people that were killed while I was there. And I will have those days where, man, it would be really nice to like sit on a couch and talk to a provider and be like, hey, there are these little thoughts that pop up. How do I how do I navigate those?
Mhm. Absolutely. And what I've discovered is that with my vets, from whatever era, just because I have served and been in combat myself, they are able to open up a lot more, and so I encourage, any veteran, even if you don't wanna sit down and talk to a therapist,
Right.
join a veterans group or, like, somehow reach out to your old battle buddies and talk to them about what you're feeling. A lot of family members don't understand, and that's not their fault, but they've never been boots on the ground. They've never been
Right.
in those kinds of
And they're not gonna
situations.
have those feelings
No.
of survivor's guilt and
Mhm.
everything else.
Correct.
Um, with your day-to-day now,
Yeah.
how special is every day to you? Knowing that where you've come from, the path you've taken to help get you here anyway, is that like every time a patient, stands up and walks out the door with a
Mhm.
smile on?
Mhm. It is the besides my family, my children, my God, it is the greatest joy of my life. I don't have a job. I am, um I am so blessed to be able to work with, veterans and, I mean, and, civilians alike, but, no, it's not a job, and actually somebody asked me the other day, um, "Are you doing what y are you doing what you want to be doing with your life?" And hands down, absolutely. Um, God has blessed me so immensely, and I love being able to look back on all of the things that you went through, how I got to the point where I'm at now. Um, Going to wing it, getting my bachelor's in psychology, but not using it again for another, 10 years, Um, my steps have been measured, and so, and my trajectory right now is exactly where it needs to be.
If you could say something to people who are watching, veterans, civilians, what's your message to them?
Um,
And look into the
oh,
camera.
okay.
There we go, fourth wall.
Ah, my message to you would be, don't wait to go and have a conversation with somebody, and also recognize that there's nothing wrong with you. What you've been through, especially if you're a veteran, is something that we've all been through to some degree. And so I would highly encourage you to reach out even if it's not to a therapist, to reach out to a friend or somebody that can understand the plight that you've been through.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Questions, hours of service. See you next time.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.